Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep today into something so many language learners really wrestle with.
That feeling of getting stuck.
Exactly. You're putting in the hours, right? Learning vocabulary, battling grammar, but then you hit this wall. How do you actually get better at speaking?
Yeah. It's a really common frustration, this idea that you absolutely need a conversation partner or you just can't improve.
It feels like a total roadblock for a lot of people, doesn't it? Maybe you don't have anyone to practice with, or maybe, you just feel too shy or self-conscious to try speaking with native speakers yet.
Absolutely. And you start thinking, well, how am I ever going to get fluent if I'm not having these real-time conversations? It's a very logical thought, but
The source material we're looking at today offers a different perspective.
a really powerful one, actually. It basically says, hold on, not so fast. It argues that you can make huge strides in your speaking, even without a partner, and it gives you practical ways to do it.
That's the real, the aha moment right up front
Yep,
in
you
the
have it.
source, isn't it? It challenges that whole assumption.
It really does. It points out that actually loads of successful English learners did get really fluent without always having someone to talk to. They used smart techniques, practiced consistently on their own.
So it's not just wishful thinking. The source is saying, look, people do this, it works, and here's how you can do it too.
Precisely. It validates the frustration, acknowledges that barrier, but then it pivots straight into empowerment. It shows you how to use your own time, your own environment to build those speaking skills independently.
Okay, so for this deep dive, our mission is pretty clear then. We're going to pull apart this source material, extract all that practical advice, understand the why behind it, and basically give you, the listener, a set of tools, actionable things you can actually start doing, like today. Plus, a better grasp on why practicing alone isn't just a backup plan, but can be super effective.
Yeah, we'll cover how it's genuinely possible to practice effectively by yourself. We'll get into the specific techniques, the source details for building that fluency.
And things like, how do you even know if you're making mistakes? How do you self-correct pronunciation or grammar when it's just you? The source touches on that too, right?
It does. It offers insights on that self-correction loop.
Hmm.
And crucially, how to make this solo practice feel, well, less like a chore and more engaging and genuinely useful. All based entirely on what this source suggests.
So by the end, you should feel like you've got a kind of flexible plan, something you can use anytime, anywhere, even if you're the only English speaker for miles around.
Exactly. Think of it as turning that alone time, which maybe felt like wasted time before, into really productive practice, taking control of your own progress.
Right. Shifting from I can't practice to, okay, how can I practice effectively right now on my own terms?
Using methods that, according to this material, genuinely help people break through that speaking barrier.
Okay, enough talking about it. Let's actually dive into the specific methods this source lays out. Where does it start?
Right, let's get into the techniques.
So the source kicks things off with what it apparently calls the easiest and most effective method. Sounds promising.
Yeah, and it's probably the one that sounds the simplest, maybe even a bit silly. It's just talking to yourself.
Talking to yourself. Okay. Yeah, the source acknowledges right away that it might feel funny, right?
It does. It says it sounds funny, which, let's be honest, it absolutely can feel strange at first.
Yeah.
Picturing yourself just narrating your day out loud.
Definitely feels a bit eccentric, but the source doesn't just leave it there. It quickly says, but it actually helps a lot.
And the explanation for why it helps, according to the source, gets right to the core of a huge challenge for learners,
Which is?
the translation habit. The source states the key benefit is that talking to yourself trains your brain to think directly in English.
Ah, okay. So it helps you skip that step where you think in your native language first.
Exactly. It points out quite rightly that many language learners think in their native language first and then try to translate to English. And that translation process, that mental detour, it's what causes a lot of the hesitation, the slowness, the unnatural sounding speech.
Right. Every time you translate, you're adding this extra mental step, this lag time.
It's like trying to run a race while constantly stopping to consult a map in a different language. By talking to yourself in English about what you're doing or thinking right now, you force your brain to connect the thought or the action directly to the English words.
So you're training that pathway. English thought leads directly to English speech.
You got it. You're basically paving that direct road in your brain. And the source suggests making it super practical, just weaving it into your daily life. Narrate your actions.
Like being your own sports commentator, but for, like, making toast.
Huh, pretty much. The examples in the source are really down to earth. Like when you first wake up, you could literally say out loud, okay, I'm getting out of bed.
Or heading to the bathroom. Now I'm brushing my teeth.
Standing in front of the closet. What should I wear today? These tiny everyday moments become mini practice sessions.
Okay, that sounds manageable. It's not like you have to invent grand topics.
Not at all. And it's not just narrating the present moment. The source also suggests talking about your plans for the day or near future.
Ah, so like a verbal to-do list.
Kinda, yeah. The examples given are things like, today I have a meeting at work, or maybe I need to prepare a report, followed by, and then go grocery shopping.
So slightly more complex sentences involving future intentions or sequences?
Exactly. But still grounded in your immediate reality. You're using English to process and articulate your own life, your own plans.
And the source really hammers home the main principle here, doesn't it? It says the key is...
Speak naturally, like you're narrating your day. It stresses that it's not about perfection, especially at the start. It's about getting the words flowing, getting comfortable producing English sentences consistently.
And why is that natural, low-stakes approach so important, according to the source?
Because, as it explicitly states, it forces your brain to form English sentences quickly and without stress. That without stress part is absolutely vital.
Because there's no audience, no fear of judgment.
Precisely. You're talking only to yourself. There's zero performance anxiety. No one's grading you. No one's waiting impatiently. This relaxed state allows your brain to just practice, to form those sentences, even simple ones, rapidly and start making it automatic.
It removes the pressure that often makes our brains freeze up in real conversations.
Totally. It builds that foundational muscle memory for quick English production in a safe space.
Okay, let's dig just a bit deeper here, based on what the source is saying. How exactly does narrating these simple, everyday things actually achieve that goal of thinking directly in English? What's the mechanism?
Well, the source implies it's the immediacy and the repetition. When you see, say, your coffee mug, and instead of thinking the word in your native language and then translating, you immediately say, my coffee mug, or I need to watch this mug in English, you're forging a direct link.
Concept to English word, bypassing the middleman.
Exactly. And you do this for brushing teeth, opening the fridge, checking your phone, dozens, maybe hundreds of times a day. Each time you verbalize that simple action or observation directly in English, you're strengthening that direct neural pathway.
Like carving a groove in your brain.
Repetition makes that pathway the default, overriding the old translation habit for these common concepts and actions. It's like immersion, but inside your own head and immediate surroundings.
And that stress, it helps avoid the source, connects it to forming sentences quickly. Can you elaborate on that connection? What kind of stress are we talking about?
It seems to be the stress of real-time interaction. In a conversation, there's pressure, right? You need to understand what the other person said, formulate your own thought, find the right words, get the grammar reasonably correct, and say it all relatively quickly while maybe worrying about being judged.
Yeah, that's a lot of cognitive load all at once.
It really is. And that pressure can cause anxiety, which leads to hesitating, blocking, forgetting words you actually know. Talking to yourself eliminates all that external social pressure.
Okay.
There's no time limit, no one waiting, no potential embarrassment. You can pause, backtrack, rephrase, talk slowly. It doesn't matter. This low-stress zone is perfect for building that basic fluency and confidence. You can just focus on the mechanics of getting English sentences out without the extra mental noise of social anxiety.
So the lack of stress allows for faster, easier practice of the core skill-forming sentences.
Exactly. That's the link the source makes. Practice forming them quickly and without stress, leading to more automatic production over time. It's a safe space to fail and try again.
Makes sense. A foundation technique, really. Okay, so after talking to yourself, where does the source go next? What's the second method?
The second one it highlights is what it calls the voice recording technique. Another powerful method, it says.
Voice recording. Okay, so this involves technology, obviously. What's the main goal here?
The primary benefit, according to the source, is that it helps you actually hear yourself. It helps you hear your mistakes and improve pronunciation.
Which is surprisingly hard to do while you're actually speaking, isn't it? You're so focused on just getting the message out.
Absolutely. The source makes a really key point here. Many learners don't realize how they sound until they listen to themselves. It's true for everyone, even in our native language. We often have a very different internal perception of our voice and speech compared to the reality.
Like hearing yourself on a voicemail and thinking, do I really sound like that?
Exactly that feeling. So Recording yourself speaking English and then playing it back gives you that crucial objective perspective. Suddenly, you can actually analyze your pronunciation, grammar, and fluency in a way that's just impossible in the moment.
It's like getting an instant replay and being your own coach.
And the source lays out some really clear practical steps for doing this.
Okay, what are they?
First step, choose a simple topic. Again, keeping it simple is key. The source suggests things you know well, like describe your favorite movie or talk about your last vacation.
Right, so you're not struggling for ideas and trying to speak fluently at the same time. Focus on the language.
Precisely. Minimize that cognitive load. Step 2, set a timer for 1 to 2 minutes and start speaking. The timer gives it structure, encourages you to talk for a decent chunk of time to get into a flow, but also gives you a clear endpoint.
1 to 2 minutes feels achievable, not too daunting.
Exactly. And then comes the really crucial part, step 3. Listen to your recording and write down any mistakes or areas for improvement.
Ah, the analysis phase. This is where the learning happens.
Yes. This is active self-correction. You listen back, maybe multiple times, and you become your own detective. You might notice, oh, I keep mispronouncing that sound, or I always forget the as on third-person verbs, or my sentences sound really choppy there.
And writing them down makes it concrete, doesn't it? So you're not just vaguely aware of mistakes. You have specific things to work on.
Totally. It helps you identify your specific recurring patterns of error. Maybe it's a particular vowel sound or a common grammar mistake, or maybe you hesitate every time you need a past tense verb. The recording captures it all.
That feels incredibly useful. Personalized feedback generated by you for you.
It is. But the source adds another layer to this technique, a really valuable bonus tip.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It suggests comparing your recording to a native speaker.
Okay, how does that work?
It recommends finding a video or maybe a podcast where a native speaker is discussing the same topic or something very similar to what you just recorded yourself talking about.
Ah, so like if I talked about my favorite movie, I find a native speaker reviewing that same movie.
Exactly. Or talking about vacations, if you talked about your vacation. Then the source says you listen to how they speak and try to copy their style.
Copy their style. That's interesting phrasing. It sounds like more than just repeating words. What does style mean here, do you think?
Well, the source doesn't explicitly define it, but based on the context, analyzing your own pronunciation, grammar, fluency when you compare it to a native speaker, style likely includes things like their rhythm, their intonation patterns, the melody of their speech where their voice goes up and down.
Okay.
Also, word stress, which syllables they emphasize. Sentence stress, which words carry the main meaning, how they link words together smoothly, what's often called connected speech, their overall pace, maybe even the natural phrases or idioms they use.
So it's about capturing the sound and the flow of natural English, not just the accuracy.
Exactly. You're moving beyond just avoiding errors to actually acquiring that naturalness. You listen to your recording, then you listen to the native speaker talking about the same thing, and you can really hear the differences in those subtle musical aspects of the language.
And then you try to incorporate those elements into your own speech next time you practice.
That's the idea. It gives you a clear target for what natural fluent speech sounds like in that specific context. It's refining the delivery.
Okay, let's use the sources framework again. Why is hearing yourself objectively on a recording so vital for improvement, according to the source?
Because, as the source points out, our self-perception while speaking is just unreliable. We're juggling too many things, mentally formulating thoughts, finding words, monitoring grammar, maybe worrying about the listener. We literally can't pay full attention to how we sound.
Right, our focus is elsewhere.
A recording captures the raw output. It lets you step back and listen purely as an observer, without the pressure of producing the language at the same time. You can hear the stumbles, the mispronunciations, the grammatical slips, the awkward pauses, things you are likely completely unaware of while speaking.
It makes the invisible visible, or the inaudible audible, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. It provides concrete data on your actual speech habits, not just what you think you sound like. That awareness is the first step to fixing anything.
And how does adding that comparison to a native speaker really complement the self-analysis? What does it add?
Self-analysis is great for spotting what's wrong, or maybe just awkward in your own speech. The native speaker comparison shows you what sounds right and natural. It provides a clear, high-quality model.
So you might hear something's off in your recording, but not know how to fix it.
Precisely. Listening to the native speaker can illuminate it. You might notice, that's how they connect those words, or, oh, they stress that word in the sentence, or their intonation falls there, mine rises. It provides specific, audible targets for improvement that go beyond just basic error correction.
It bridges the gap between grammatically correct and naturally fluent.
Exactly. It helps you acquire those nuances, rhythm, intonation, flow, that are so important for sounding natural and confident, which, as the source points out later, native speakers really value.
So if we're thinking about that style aspect, again, pronunciation, grammar, fluency, what specific things would a learner be listening for and trying to copy when comparing themselves to a native speaker?
Based on the source's focus, they'd likely be listening for. First, pronunciation nuances. Not just individual sounds, but word stress, like record versus archord. Sentence stress, emphasizing key words, and especially intonation patterns, the rise and fall that conveys meaning and attitude.
Okay, the music of the language.
Second, fluency markers. The native speaker's pace, their use of pauses, natural ones, not long hesitations, and critically connected speech, how they link words like want to becomes wanna, going to becomes gonna, or how sounds blend across word boundaries, trying to mimic that smoothness.
Right, making it sound less like reading words one by one.
Exactly. And third, while analyzing their own grammar is key, when listening to the native speaker, they might pick up on natural phrasing. Common collocations, words that naturally go together, idioms or sentence structures that just sound right for that topic. It's about absorbing patterns of natural usage.
So copying style is really about mimicking the overall delivery package, the sound, the rhythm, the flow to sound more natural.
Yeah, pretty much. Using your own recording as a starting point,
Yeah.
and the native recording as the target model for those specific aspects. It's a really comprehensive approach.
Self-assessment plus targeted imitation.
Oh,
Very powerful. Okay, so we've talked to ourselves, we've recorded ourselves. What's next? The source introduces something that involves looking at ourselves too.
yes. Method number 3, the mirror speaking challenge.
Mirror speaking. Okay, this sounds potentially even more awkward than just talking to yourself.
It can feel that way initially, for sure. The technique involves exactly what it sounds like. You stand in front of a mirror and start talking in English.
So talking to my own reflection, why? What's the point of adding the visual element?
The source is very specific about this. It says the mirror is a tool, and you should use it to watch your mouth, your facial expressions, and your confidence level.
Okay, watching my mouth makes sense for pronunciation, maybe. Facial expressions, okay. But confidence level. How do you see confidence in a mirror?
The source implies that confidence isn't just internal. It shows physically. By watching yourself, you can observe things like, are you making eye contact with your reflection? This practices the feeling of direct gaze. Is your posture open and relaxed or hunched and tense?
Body language.
Exactly. And facial expressions, do they match what you're saying? Do you look engaged or stressed? The source claims that practicing this way helps you feel more comfortable speaking.
How so? How does seeing yourself help with comfort?
It seems to be about desensitization and familiarity. Many learners feel self-conscious not just about sounding wrong, but about looking weird while speaking a foreign language, the way their mouth moves for unfamiliar sounds, their concentrated expression.
Right, that feeling of I must look strange doing this.
The mirror forces you to confront that visual image. By repeatedly seeing yourself speaking English, you normalize it. It becomes less strange, less intimidating. You get used to the physical act and appearance of yourself speaking the language.
It's like exposure therapy for the visual aspect of speaking. Makes sense.
And the source highlights what it calls the best part of this method.
Which is?
You become your own conversation partner.
Okay, how is that different from just talking to yourself?
It adds an interactive simulation. The source encourages you to actually ask yourself a question, then answer it, while looking at yourself.
So it's not just a monologue, it's creating a mini dialogue with yourself.
Exactly. You initiate, then respond. The source gives a simple but clear example. You look in the mirror, ask, what's your favorite food? And then you answer, still looking at yourself. Oh, I love sushi. It's delicious, and I like trying different types of rolls.
So you're practicing both asking and answering, retrieving information, formulating a response with reasons. It's definitely closer to a real conversation flow than just narrating.
Much closer. It engages more conversational skills. And the source explicitly points out the broader benefits beyond just the words. It says this technique helps you practice eye contact, body language, and natural expression, just like in a real conversation.
Those nonverbal elements, they're so important, but often get ignored in language practice.
Totally. Eye contact shows engagement. Body language conveys confidence or nervousness. Facial expressions add emotion and nuance. You really can't practice these effectively just talking into thin air or a recorder. The mirror adds that crucial visual feedback loop.
So you're practicing the whole communication package, verbal and nonverbal, together.
That's the idea, making you a more natural and effective communicator overall, not just someone who can form correct sentences.
Okay, let's dig into this mirror method a bit more, using the source's logic. How exactly does seeing yourself speak make you more comfortable, according to the source?
The source directly links seeing yourself to feeling more comfortable speaking. The implied mechanism is familiarity breeding comfort. By repeatedly observing the physical act your mouth moving, your expressions changing as you speak English, you demystify it. It stops feeling alien or awkward because you've seen it many times.
You get used to your English-speaking self.
Exactly. It reduces the self-consciousness associated with the physical performance of speaking, making you less inhibited when you have to do it in front of real people. You've already faced your toughest critic yourself in the mirror.
Right. Removes that fear of the unknown visual.
Mm-hmm.
And what about watching facial expressions and body language? What can that reveal about communication beyond the words, based on what the source suggests?
The source connects watching these to gauging your confidence level and achieving natural expression. So watching yourself might reveal, for instance, if you're frowning with concentration, even when saying something positive, which might send a mixed message.
Or if you look really stiff and nervous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or if you're avoiding eye contact with your reflection, suggesting discomfort. Becoming aware of these nonverbal signals allows you to consciously practice aligning them with your message. You can practice smiling when appropriate, maintaining a more open posture, using gestures naturally.
So you learn to use your body and face to support your words, making the whole message clearer and more engaging.
Precisely. It helps you practice communicating as a whole person, integrating the nonverbal cues that are essential for natural, effective interaction, just like in a real conversation, as the source says.
It's performance practice, but for everyday communication. Very interesting. Okay, that covers the mirror. There's one more specific technique the source details, right?
Yes, the final one is called the 1-minute fluency drill.
1-minute drill. Sounds intense. What's the goal of this one?
The source introduces it as another great method, specifically designed to help you speak faster and think quicker in English. So it's really targeting speed and spontaneity.
Like simulating the pressure of a fast-paced conversation?
Pretty much, yeah. Training you to respond quickly without long pauses. The steps are simple again. First, choose a simple topic. The example given is talk about your daily routine.
Keeping it simple again, focus on the speed.
Second, set a timer for 1 minute and start speaking without stopping. That's the key instruction. Without stopping.
For a whole minute. What if you completely blank or can't find a word? That seems really hard.
And the source anticipates exactly that. The third rule is crucial. If you get stuck, don't pause. Just say anything to keep going.
Say anything, literally anything, even nonsense that feels wrong somehow. Isn't the goal to speak correctly?
For this specific drill, the primary goal isn't perfect accuracy. It's building fluency and automaticity. The source explains why you shouldn't stop. This trains your brain to think and speak at the same time, just like in real conversations.
Okay. How does saying anything train that?
Think about real conversations. When native speakers momentarily get stuck, they don't usually fall completely silent for long. They use fillers, like the rephrase, they circle back. They keep the communication channel open while their brain catches up.
Okay. They bridge the gap.
Exactly. This drill forces you to practice that bridging skill. By making the rule don't stop, you train your brain not to freeze or revert to silence or your native language when you hit a momentary block. You learn to maintain the flow of English output, even if it means using a filler word or saying something slightly tangential, just to keep talking while you find the right thought or word.
So the say anything is really a placeholder strategy to maintain momentum and train your brain to keep operating in English, even under pressure.
Precisely. It's about overriding the habit of stopping completely, which kills fluency. You're training the mental agility needed for real-time, continuous speech.
And the source suggests this has a noticeable long-term effect.
Yes, it says that with consistent practice doing this drill regularly, you'll notice that you start speaking more smoothly and naturally.
Because you're reducing those hesitations and training your brain to connect thoughts to speech more rapidly.
Exactly. You build that automaticity, the pauses get shorter, the flow improves, it becomes less effortful over time.
It really does sound like high-intensity interval training for speaking. Short, focused bursts of pushing your limits.
That's a great analogy. It targets the speed and simultaneous processing aspects of fluency directly. Accuracy can be refined with other methods, like the recording and analysis, but this drill is about getting faster and smoother.
Okay, wow. So those are the 4 core techniques the source lays out. Talking to yourself, recording yourself, using a mirror, and the 1-minute drill. That's a solid toolkit.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the source doesn't just stop at listing techniques. It then connects them to some broader ideas about communication, particularly in English-speaking cultures.
Right. It steps back to give some context for why these techniques are so relevant. What does it say?
It makes a pretty bold statement. In English-speaking cultures, confidence is key.
Confidence is key. Okay, that's interesting. Does it elaborate?
Yes, it follows up with something that might be surprising or maybe relieving for many learners. Even if you make grammar mistakes, native speakers care more about how smoothly and confidently you speak.
Really? More than perfect grammar. That seems significant.
It is. The source specifically mentions cultures like the US, the UK, and Australia, saying that in these places people tend to admire good communication skills. And it defines that further.
Okay.
It says people focus more on fluency and expression than on perfect grammar.
Wow. Okay, so fluency, the smoothness, the flow and expression, conveying your meaning clearly, maybe with some personality, those are valued more highly than getting every single grammatical rule right.
That's what the source strongly suggests. It doesn't mean grammar isn't important. Obviously, clear communication requires a decent level of accuracy, but it highlights a common perception. A speaker who is confident, fluent, and expressive, even with some errors, is often perceived more positively and is easier to communicate with than someone who has perfect grammar but speaks very slowly, hesitantly, and without confidence.
Because the communication itself flows better, even if it's not technically perfect.
Exactly. The source implies native speakers in these cultures often prioritize the overall effectiveness and ease of communication.
And this loops right back to the solo practice techniques, doesn't it?
Perfectly. Think about it. Talking to yourself builds foundational sentence formation without stress core fluency. Recording helps you smooth out pronunciation and delivery fluency and clarity. Mirror speaking directly targets visual confidence and expression. The 1-minute drill pushes speed and reduces hesitation, pure fluency building.
So all these techniques are directly developing the very qualities, confidence, fluency, expression that the source says are highly valued in English communication.
Precisely. They're not just random exercises. They're targeted training for impactful communication in these cultural contexts.
And the source offers one more really encouraging point to validate all this solo practice.
Yeah, this is a great point. It points out that you're actually in good company if you practice alone. Even native speakers do it.
Native speakers, how so?
It gives the specific example of public speakers. It says, many public speakers practice alone before they speak in public. And how do they practice?
Let me guess. Mirror. Recording.
Exactly. The source says they talk to themselves in front of a mirror, record their voice, and rehearse their speech, just like we talked about today.
That's fantastic validation. If skilled native speakers rely on these same methods, mirror work, recording, rehearsal, to prepare for important communication, it really shows these aren't just beginner techniques or a poor substitute for conversation.
It completely legitimizes them. These are methods used to hone communication skills at a high level.
Takes away any feeling that it's weird or second best.
Totally. The source wraps up that point by saying, so don't feel weird about practicing alone. It's actually a technique that even native speakers use to improve their speaking skills. It reframes solo practice as a legitimate, powerful tool set.
Not a limitation, but an opportunity.
Exactly.
Okay, thinking about this bigger picture, the source paints. How does knowing about this cultural emphasis on confidence and fluency make these solo techniques seem particularly useful for learners?
Well, if the goal is effective communication in environments like the US, UK, or Australia, and those cultures, according to the source, value confident and fluent delivery, sometimes even over perfect grammar, then practicing techniques that directly build those specific skills makes perfect sense.
It aligns your practice with the desired outcome.
Mm-hmm. Learners often focus obsessively on avoiding grammar errors, which can ironically make them less fluent and confident because they're so hesitant. This source suggests that dedicating practice time to improving fluency and confidence using these solo methods might actually lead to more successful interactions with native speakers than solely focusing on grammar correction. You're practicing what matters most to your listeners, according to this perspective.
It shifts the practice priorities based on real-world communication values.
Right. It gives a very practical reason to invest time in these fluency-building exercises.
And why is knowing that native speakers, especially skilled ones like public speakers, use these same techniques potentially so motivating for someone learning the language?
Oh, hugely motivating, I think. It combats that feeling of isolation or thinking, I'm only doing this because I can't find a partner. It removes any stigma.
Right.
When you realize that professionals, people who are already fluent, choose to use mirror practice and voice recording to refine their skills, it elevates the entire activity.
Yeah.
It's not just a remedial exercise, it's a sophisticated method for communication enhancement.
It makes you feel like you're adopting a professional training regimen, not just struggling alone.
Exactly. It validates the effort and the methods themselves. It says, this isn't weird. This is what skilled communicators do.
Yeah.
That can provide a real boost in confidence and commitment to keep practicing, knowing you're using proven techniques.
It connects your solitary practice to a wider world of skilled communication development.
It makes it feel less like a compromise and more like a smart strategy.
Well, this has been a really thorough exploration. We've really unpacked the core message of this source. We started with that common pain point, feeling stuck without a speaking partner.
That feeling of limitation.
And then we saw how this source directly counters that, arguing that solo practice is not only possible, but highly effective. And it gave us those 4 concrete methods. Talking to yourself for direct thinking.
Voice recording for analysis and modeling.
Mirror speaking for confidence and nonverbals.
And the 1-minute drill for speed and flow. We looked at the how and the why for each, based on the source's explanations.
And we connected it all back to that larger context, the idea that fluency and confidence are really valued in English communication, and that even native speakers use these kinds of solo techniques.
Yeah, the big takeaway is that effective solo practice is absolutely achievable. These techniques give you a clear roadmap to build not just accuracy, but also that crucial fluency and confidence that make communication truly work.
And the most empowering part, really coming from the source, is that you, the listener, now have this toolkit, specific things you can do literally anytime, anywhere. Your commute, while making dinner, 5 minutes before bed.
Exactly. That practice time is always available. You don't need to schedule anything or find anyone. The power to improve your speaking is right there, accessible through these methods. It removes that external dependency.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, drawing on everything this source has presented, here's something to maybe chew on.
Okay.
If this source is right, and confidence really is key, and fluency often matters more than grammatical perfection to native speakers in these contexts, does that change how you think about making mistakes when you speak English?
Ooh, that's a really good question to reflect on. Does it maybe free you up a little?
Does it mean you should worry less about every tiny error and focus more on just communicating your message smoothly and clearly? What does that imply for how you might approach your practice sessions or even real conversations going forward?
It's a potential shift in mindset, isn't it? From fear of error to focus on flow and connection. Maybe it encourages taking more risks, speaking up more readily, knowing that perfect grammar isn't always the ultimate measure of success in communication.
Perhaps it makes these solo practice methods seem even more valuable as they directly target that flow and confidence.
It definitely presents a compelling argument for incorporating them seriously into your routine.
So the invitation is there, based on the source material. Take these techniques, experiment with them. Try talking to yourself tomorrow morning. Record a quick minute on your phone. Stand in front of the mirror and ask yourself about your day. Push yourself with that fluency drill.
Find what works for you, what resonates. And the key, implied throughout the source's practical advice, is consistency. Little bits of practice, done regularly, add up.
Absolutely. That's how these techniques translate into real progress.
Keep talking, keep practicing, and enjoy the learning journey.